Hi, I'm Sharon Brett Kelly.
And I'm Alexia Russell.
And today on The Detail, we're really trying to get to the bottom of what's going on between the government and Auckland Council with these rules over housing and intensification.
And spoiler alert, no one seems to know what's going on.
No, they don't. And this all goes back to January the 15th when New Zealand Herald's commentator, columnist Matthew Hooton broke the news that there was about to be another government U-turn on Auckland's planning changes. Yes, yet another. He said National was about to drop plans to force the council to change zoning rules that would have allowed another 2 million homes to be built over the next 30 years. So we waited and waited, but since then, crickets. And it turns out that the Housing Minister and Hutt South MP Chris Bishop was blindsided by Auckland-based Prime Minister Christopher Luxon's new ideas. They appear to be at odds with each other over this. It's a pretty messy business. But Alexia, you've been speaking to the chair of the council's planning committee, trying to get a handle on things. So what is happening?
Yeah, well, you mentioned that magical 2 million number, and this seems to be one of the major issues, that it is a mythical number. And Richard Hill's talked to me about that. But it's really upset Aucklanders. A lot of them have been getting in the ears of the Auckland MPs. So I think that's possibly what's at the base of this election coming out, U-turn, they want Auckland. So, Richard talked me through the numbers, talked me through also another astounding number, and that's just how much money they have wasted with these triple U-turns.
How much?
13 million.
Blimmin' heck.
And that's just a start. That's not staff time. That's just admin.
Crazy. And you came back full of drama. There's quite a bit going on behind the scenes, which there's a lot that you can't specifically talk about. But what can you tell us?
There is a huge amount of conflict between the government and Auckland mayor and councillors. And, Wayne Brown's not backward about coming forward. He's told them on many times to stick to their knitting to keep out of Auckland's business. But even Richard Hill's the most mild-mannered man you can think of is extremely frustrated at this constant uncertainty and this dictation coming from the government when it doesn't seem to know anything about what it's doing. I mean, that's the major issue. Council doesn't think that the government really knows what it's talking about, either on intensification, these new rates caps that are coming in, council finances, the abilities of councils to raise money. They're fed up.
So we're going to hear a bit more from Richard Hills, but I got in touch with a couple of people in my neighbourhood who've been really active in trying to get some answers, some assurances for years actually. And full disclosure, I'm in a flood zone in Sandringham that was really badly hit by the 2023 Auckland Anniversary Day storms. And we're on one of the worst hit streets that now has a lot of empty sections where there were once like standalone bungalows or small public housing units. And the big fear here for a lot of people is that these big sections will be sold to developers who will build multi-storey units, and we just do not have the infrastructure in our suburb to cope with even what's there already when there's a big flooding event.
Okay, let's hear from Kristen and Philip.
First of all, if you say your name.
Philip Bradley.
Kristen De Monchy. Our home flooded on the 27th of January back in 2023.
The impact on the neighbourhood was so severe and everybody got absolutely nailed.
And so since then, both of you have been very active in trying to get better infrastructure for this suburb.
Yeah, I mean, we made it clear right from the outset that this wasn't about intensity. In fact, within the community that we've been working with, seems to be a high level of support for intensification, but not when the infrastructure's not there to support it. In our case, the stormwater infrastructure is basically non-existent.
So under these roads, the pipes that are there are what the original pipes when these roads were first built, or even
correct.
older
I mean,
than that.
well, you see, there's never been a stormwater system built here. The system that exists, the piping under the streets around us now, is basically around delivering water to houses and taking wastewater away and maybe adding a little bit of stormwater into it where they can.
And what do you say to people who say, well, hang on, the Central Interceptor is coming through here, is it?
So yes, it is, but the Central Interceptor is for wastewater, not for stormwater. So that's the key difference, right? So that's taking away everything from your loos and your washing machines, but it is not taking away our stormwater. Now, we do have a combined wastewater and stormwater system in our neighbourhood, but what happens is once the flows get over much higher than a 1 in 10 year event, they shut off connection to the wastewater network, which means the stormwater's got to go somewhere, so it goes on the streets.
So you've both had numerous meetings, along with other people in this neighbourhood, numerous meetings with Watercare Council, Healthy Waters, which is part of Watercare now. What have you been asking for all along? Is it better infrastructure?
Oh, look, it has to be, and there's no lack of knowledge, and in fact the limitations inside the Meola catchment generally, which is the whole area surrounding us, is a really well understood problem. I mean, there are hundreds of papers on this. You search on the internet, you can find dozens of studies, but they just seem to be reluctant to try and find a solution that doesn't just involve people accepting that flooding happens.
We should point out where we are because we're on Parish Road, and if you carry on along this road up towards Dominion, right now there are two major developments going on just on that corner. One is, I think, about 25 apartments. The one across the road, roughly the same, maybe a bit less.
Yeah.
For people living down here in a flood zone, we're not far from Eden Park, we're right in a flood zone, that's acknowledged. That's pretty nerve-wracking, isn't it, Kristen?
Definitely, and we talked before about the combined stormwater and wastewater and the fact that once we get past a certain level, access to the stormwater networks gets shut off. Therefore, a lot of the other ways of managing stormwater for our neighbourhood, or the only other way really, is soakage. So that basically means green space to soak up stormwater. So the more we cover in these sections and properties and the more we develop, the less green space we have, the more concrete you have, which increases the water runoff, which increases the flooding in our neighbourhood.
Okay, shall we walk down Parish Road?
Sure.
Because this road is a really good illustration.
Well, it was a river in the flooding.
Yes. Yeah. And what have we ended up with? We've ended up with, Kristen, a number of empty properties right now.
Yes, there are a number of Category 3 properties. Some of them were council owned, some of them were individually owned, which have since been sold to council, and there are also a number of Kāinga Ora properties which are currently listed for sale. So they're not part of the Category 3 buyout from council. So that is another concern of our group, that Kāinga Ora is trying to sell these properties where we know, actually in some of them at the end here, people had to swim out, or they were rescued by the fire department on one side and swam out on the other.
And have either of you had any assurances from Kāinga Ora or the council, if there is going to be a development there, that these properties aren't going to flood all over again?
The challenge is that they got consented under the old planning regime. They are intending, as far as we know, just to build what was consented previously.
And what's that?
There's going to be 8 or 9 properties on there. We've talked to the council about whether they could revisit the consents that were involved here, and they refused to do that. They have the right to do it.
Do they?
They do have the right to do it.
Wouldn't it turn into a big legal fight?
Because we also understand the consents were issued based on stormwater levels that were the data was
that were
about
30 years out of date. So you intensify in here, and it does have a knock-on effect. It's incremental, and it's the same knock-on effect though as the same property as if it was 2 kilometres uphill from us here, because it all flows down to here.
Should we walk along to this one? This is a double-storey, multi-home development on what was, as you say, a single-storey section.
So this, because of the topography of the land, this was a river, came flooding down through here and straight across into these properties here, as well as joining the river that was coming down the road.
This was 3 years ago.
The people who lived here, woman was here home on her own that night with the dog. She had to swim out to dry land on Sandringham Road. It was
and
really
now
deep.
we have 4 homes built where that house was.
And again, consented under the old rules.
Yes.
So this is perfectly legitimate, isn't it?
But it wouldn't be under the new rules.
So, Philip, tell me about the meeting that you went to up the road on Dominion Road, where you looked at...
Yes, it's just as the development of Plan Change 120 was coming to an end. They were just about to make it public. So we had A3 maps, all coloured, And we tried tactically to work out what we were going to do in terms of a submission on that plan. What started out as having intermittent areas of single house zoning and grades below that was fully intensified by the end of the meeting. It was unbelievable. Meeting on Friday night with one set of maps, Saturday morning, different set of maps, nothing to do with us. They're just redrawing it as they were going in order to hit a deadline.
What you saw on the Saturday morning, is that what's in front of us now? Is that, or has it changed again?
Well, it has changed again because they realised that they hadn't taken into account the compulsorily acquired properties that got really severely flooded.
Yeah.
So they were making mistakes in real time, changing them back after they published I think the first publication of Plan Change 120 didn't have that acknowledgement in it. And then people went, what are you doing? And then they changed it again.
And the latest is, well, we're kind of waiting for Chris Bishop to say that they're backtracking on the 2 million homes plan, right?
Yes, that's as far as we understand, because I think there's been a lot of pushback. If you go along to a lot of these public meetings, there are a lot of people who really just cannot believe. I think that 2 million number has really worried people, and the idea that this is a 100-year plan, whereas in other cities like Christchurch, they need to have a 30-year plan for housing.
Even if the government didn't about a U-turn on it, would that make any difference to what's going on here?
Look, it's unlikely. I mean, the reality is that we've got a real infrastructure deficit the Mayola catchment, of which we are kind of the low point, or one of the low points, is the largest catchment in Auckland, and it has no infrastructure for moving stormwater, as we talked about earlier. And so that's not going to, we see no sign of that changing. We see no sign of the forward planning that's needed to intensify the city.
What now? What's next?
I guess we've got to wait and see what the government do next. But the reality is, if all it does is paper over the cracks of what is a pretty poorly thought out plan, that's not going to resolve the issue. So, look, the reality is, from a community point of view, we need to keep on advocating to have infrastructure solutions, even basic ones, like parks that can soak water and all that sort of stuff. We've got to keep advocating for those things in our area. What we do have here, though, is a really highly engaged community that's paying a lot of attention. It's an election year.
Yes.
I think if we were dealing with the first year of a government, I'm not sure they'd be listening. You know, if they persist with an insane plan, there's been so much talk about it. I mean, thousands of submissions. So people are really up in arms about this.
Okay, let's listen to what Richard Hills has to say.
There's a lot of plans that we have to draw up. Through the National Policy Statement for Urban Development, we had to do a future development strategy. We've done that. We obviously have potential for a unitary plan review with the new RMA. We're not sure. We obviously had Plan Change 78, which we've now replaced with Plan Change 120.
It's such easy to remember names.
Yes, easy. And then you've got the combined plan, because the Hauraki Gulf Islands and the unitary plan are separate, so you bring them together. Then you've got a spatial plan, which is, we hope, will be sort of an update to our Auckland plan, which is something we did right at the beginning of the super city. And then you've got all the private plan changes, which come out of nowhere, and we have to react to and respond to. And often they go right outside our plan, so it's quite hard to plan.
What is the essence of the need for a plan? I mean, you know, are we talking about certainty largely?
Yeah, so some of it is certainty. So, you know, we need housing. So the plan gives some indication for the community, but also developers, infrastructure providers. So we kind of need to know where the pipes need to go, where the roads need to be, where the bus routes might go. So we need those plans in place so we can start investing in the right areas.
And the intensification discussion, when did that start? When did it sort of coalesce around public transport and the new rail links?
Yeah, so it is a complex beast. Obviously, we've had intensification for a while. The Unitary Plan 2016, we've seen, you know, quite an increase in intensification around places where there are jobs and transport. The last government introduced the National Policy Statement for Urban Development, which was around ensuring that we have far more intensification around transport hubs, around metro centres, around places where there are jobs. And then they also worked with the national opposition at the time to put in the MDRS, so the medium density residential standards, which essentially put the ability for 3 dwellings of 3 stories on every single property in Auckland. That was right across the country, all the big cities around the country.
People hated that.
Yeah, so a lot of people, didn't know exactly what it meant, but also saw, because you put out a plan, but actually the MDRS was operative straight away. So it meant that the day after it went out for consultation, people could start building those 3 dwellings, 3 stories on properties, but without consent, so it was a permitted activity. And some of that was the right thing to do in some areas, but we did see that start popping up in random places, in places where there was no... not even a bus or not even a park or just...
Like the whole of Kimu.
Yeah, people start going, well, this sort of seems backwards when there's suburbs closer to the city that aren't getting intensified. And then you, of course, had the floods. We asked for the government to put a halt on the plan change because we needed to relook at, we were suddenly intensifying in some of the worst hit areas. So how we could strengthen our plans. We soon realised that we couldn't legally do any downzoning. We couldn't legally actually change a lot of what we were doing.
Because the government had come in over the top of you.
Yes, but also the way that the MDRS and the rules were set up, council couldn't take it on ourselves to downzone any hazardous areas, flooded areas. So we were still seeing a lot of consents in what people would say were dangerous areas.
Flood zones, yeah.
So we asked for a stop with the last government due to hazards and flooding and slips. They said, yep, put a hold on it, but we actually needed the law to be changed. And I don't think either Red or Blue understood that until we really got underneath of what we were, stopped from doing. So then finally we got this law change, but in my opinion, a bit too late, August before our election. So we had about 2 months to do anything. But that was to deal with the light rail corridor. That was left blank because there was going to be light rail and then the government cancelled that. Also to deal with hazards, also because the government campaigned on the ability to opt out of the MDRS, which meant that a lot of people wanted to opt out. So that rule or law gave us the ability to opt out of that too. What we didn't realise is in that law, right at the end there, it also required us to keep the capacity the same across the city. So there was no magical 2 million number, but it said Plan Change 78 capacity for housing needs to be kept the same through to Plan Change 120.
Okay, now let's talk about the magical 2 million number, because
Yes.
that seems to be a real button pusher,
Yeah.
and some of even your councillors don't really understand what's going on here. Is the council planning to get 2 million more homes built in Auckland? That's about, 7 million more people.
Yeah, so that is a complete and utter nonsense, and every councillor or politician who said that we were expecting 2 million more homes was doing it for campaign reasons, was absolutely lying, because then I could have said it till I was blue in the face, and so did the mayor, and so did the minister, and so did our staff.
It is just a number that is provided for or enabled by the plan that will absolutely never all be built in any reality in this life, or possibly future lives.
So the unitary plan, I think, allowed about 900,000 dwellings or so, but it never meant that we expected 900,000. The Plan Change 78 and then 120 allowed this magical number of around 2 million. But that means if it would take every single person or property owner in Auckland to develop their property to the maximum possible available capacity on every single site in Auckland, which we know that most people won't. A lot of people will stay in their homes forever, a lot of people won't sell, and there's not the development community or the population that would ever build out every single property in Auckland. All our data said we're probably going to expect 300 to 400,000 new homes in the next 30 years, no matter what the plan was.
Meanwhile, half of Auckland's freaking out because there's a 3-storey building going up on their fence line. The sun's blocked out. There's no parking on the street.
Yeah, so there's all government requirements again.
But if we get a situation where immigration increases and the population starts flowing in again, we're not restrained by capacity because the rules are in place.
Yeah, and the idea behind Plan Change 120, and I think a lot of people forget what Plan Change 78 looked like in their community. We actually reduced intensification and capacity across many suburbs across Auckland. We had that 3x3 everywhere, down to Pukekohe, up to Warkworth, out to Cockle Bay, back of Howick, so Half Moon Bay. So what we did was remove some of that capacity and then push it towards places like bus stations, train stations, the metro centres, all the places where you'd think sort of make sense. But of course, what was possible made a lot of people quite nervous as well, because it looked like a lot of change could be happening really quick when that probably wouldn't be the case.
So we've started in a situation where a government used to issue national policy statements, which were kind of guidelines, to a situation where the government has said councils will do this.
Yeah.
How much has the pendulum swung between autonomous councils and the government interfering?
Well, you hear a lot more from the Mayor about, getting the government out of Auckland.
Wellington reserved the right to set the parking fines in Auckland, for goodness sake. That's nonsensical. So stick to your knitting, we'll stick to ours.
And look, all governments of the day are going to have requirements or expectations on councils. That's fine, we understand it. But it has got to the point, and this is not necessarily this current government, it's kind of all governments, where more and more the requirements are put on council to do exactly what the government wants. There's not a lot of nuance. Obviously, council has to roll out the thing or the project or the rules, but often the government have told us and required us to do that. The funny thing is, as we're seeing with Plan Change 120 now, the government are suddenly realising what they made us do in the law, the speed that they asked for, has rubbed some of their MPs up the wrong way. And now we've got this swishing around of we were doing the right thing, we were doing what they told us, and now they might change all that.
What do you know about what's going on? Because Chris Bishop and Chris Luxon don't seem to be agreeing on what's happening.
So I think, once again, the frustration for the Mayor and I is that Cabinet approved these changes last year. So they all would have known exactly what they were approving, well, you'd hope so. So we're told to do something in the time that we're told, and now...
And that's in place. You got that done before the election?
Yep, so that's all in place. We're actually in the middle of an 18-20 month process, so the consultation's been done. Our staff are going through it. No MPs or councillors have seen any of the feedback yet because there's work to do to collate it all. And now there might be a change again. And we have spoken to ministers, and the Mayor's met with the Prime Minister, and we still don't know what's going to happen. We assume there'll be need to be a law change, but at the same time creating a lot of uncertainty for Aucklanders, developers, property owners, everyone kind of thinking, well, where exactly are things going to go?
So what do your staff do? They just all go on leave until it's sorted out, or what happens?
Well, no, this is the thing that I think a lot of people get confused on. The law is the law, so we have to continue until a law changes, So we continued with some of Plan Change 78 with the city centre, with things that we could do, things around the metro centres, because we just had to carry on. We're obviously paying independent hearing panel members. We've leased space to do the hearings. We've spent almost $3 million on Plan Change 120 already, $10 million on Plan Change 78 that didn't even end up as anything. So staff will have to continue on the direction we're heading until there is a change of direction.
Hang on. So far you have spent $13 million on government-mandated demands to change your plans.
Yes, that's
And you
correct.
still don't know where you stand.
And that $13 million wouldn't even include the staff time. All of that is council business, so we expect that. But it is a difficult thing when we'd like to be spending money on other things.
That's it for today. The Details, a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was engineered by William Saunders and produced by Gwen McClure and Shalise Tansey.
Thanks to Richard Hills, Kristen De Monchy and Philip Bradley. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly.
And I'm Alexia Russell. Mā te wā.